Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Open Mic Gripe with Jeffrey and Jay Van Rye, the place where serious and silly complaints come to chat.
Open Mic Gripe is a weekly podcast and radio show dedicated to hearing your gripes, grievances, and opinions on any and all topics.
Every episode, Jay and I will have the opportunity to get to the bottom of the issues which are lingering on the back of your mind and engage in order to create constructive conversation using a combination of lighthearted comedy and well-formed logic.
If you feel like we are wrong, inappropriate, or biased, then call in, email, or tweet and let your voice be heard. You can email us at openmicgripe@gmail.com or tweet to us at Open Mic Gripe, but the easiest thing to do is to contact us under Facebook. Search Open Mic Gripe if you can't figure that out.
That's right. So jump on in and gripe on the Open Mic with Jay and Jeffrey.
How's it going, Jeffrey?
It keeps going, you know?
It's going?
It's going.
All right. Forward. That's good.
Another episode.
It didn't stop. All right. That's good.
No, I'd like to introduce our guest right away this time, actually, if we could.
No waiting? No saying that you're really excited about the guest or anything?
I was going to say, you're really excited about the guest?
Yeah, well, you're kind of a jerk. I mean, usually you say you're pretty excited about the guest, and this time it's almost like you're so embarrassed to have this person on that you're just saying,
it's
like
implied.
right away introducing them.
No, it's implied. Absolutely. Today we've got a guest.
By the way, that's not very nice, Jeffrey. I'm just saying. I'm very happy to have our guest here.
Oh, you're very happy.
Oh, I'm ecstatic.
I'm ecstatic. No, you.
I think I beat you on that.
Stop.
I'm enthused. I am. Okay. So I want to welcome to the show Laurie Williams. Mm-hmm. Laurie is an extremely talented organizer, stage director, and events planner, and I worked personally on a number of projects that she's
Theater artist.
Theater artist.
Theater artist.
Mm-hmm.
Theater artist?
Theater artist.
Okay.
Laurie Williams, theater artist.
Not wedding planner.
No, not wedding planner.
Okay,
Wedding
theater
planner.
artist. Okay, Laurie, welcome to the show. Feel free to answer the hypothetical question with us today.
Okay.
And we will get to a more thorough introduction in a little bit.
No worries.
So,
He thinks this is like the most important part of the show.
I've gathered that from the other podcast.
you have to get to it before you can get to any other bit. Otherwise, it just delays.
Okay.
We can
But
humor
this
him.
doesn't delay. Basically, this delays the beginning of the show. You realize that that's really what this does.
You're welcome to go without it.
I like it too. All right.
All right, there we go.
All right, I won't push too much.
For today's hypothetical question, I want to ask you guys a question. Since Laurie is involved with a background dealing with art, and Jay, I know you're quite a connoisseur of art yourself.
Oh, you have no idea.
All of the arts, you know, you're all about it.
Yes.
So my question is, if you could be an apprentice to any artist in history, who would you work
Frank
side
Lloyd
by
Wright.
side? Huh?
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes, the architect.
What did he architect?
Most people would know about the Guggenheim in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
Most people also know about the Falling Water House, which is actually, I believe, the Roy Kaufman House in Pennsylvania, I believe, Bull Run, Pennsylvania. He also did the Marin County Civic Center in Los Angeles. He did the Hollyhock House, the Roby House, and then also he's very well known for his own home and studio in Oak Park, Illinois.
Was he involved at all with the construction of the capital of Brazil, Brasilia?
I don't think so.
Okay.
He's also very well known for the Imperial Hotel in Japan, in Tokyo, which of course does not exist anymore.
What happened?
I believe the foundation took too many earthquakes.
Okay.
And over the course of the years, it was just demolished.
Right.
You can still see some of the pottery, which he also designed for the Imperial Hotel at the Smithsonian.
Why would you work with him?
He kind of created this idea of architecture as being something what they call organic, which meant that as an architect, your job wasn't to just decide, oh, this office building needs to go here. Your job as an architect was to look at the landscape and look at the people who would be using the building and build it for them within the landscape. His buildings don't just sit on the land, they are part of the landscape.
Okay. I always thought the Guggenheim was made by Guggenheim.
No, the Guggenheim family actually is a very wealthy family that donates museums and art all over the world. Their most recent museum is the Guggenheim in Balboa, Spain, which was actually designed by Frank Gehry, who also designed the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. Another one of my favorite buildings.
Wow. Okay.
I know completely out of my field, but throughout my entire life, I've enjoyed architecture. I enjoy architectural photography. I take quite a bit of it myself whenever I travel. And I just never thought that I would be one because I'm not that great with math and engineering. So that's one of those questions. If I could do anything else, that's what I would be. I would be an architect.
If you could make a building look like anything, any object, what would it be?
Penis.
I wasn't. There was a very specific reason I wasn't asking you.
Well, the audience couldn't tell that.
Right.
I was looking directly at Laurie.
I would have to say if I could make a building look like anything, I would really like to build a library that looks like a huge stack of books. And each spine of a book would be one of my favorite books.
Interesting.
So not only would it look like a stack of books, but it would be all about my favorite books.
Okay.
That's totally what I would do.
I would make mine look like a building, but then it transforms into a transformer. And then back into a building.
That would be great.
Yeah. See?
That would be great. Especially if it could be like a clinic, or
So
a library.
You're talking about a library on wheels. You said a transformer.
No, it would have to fly with like rocket engines and
like
things
giant,
like that.
like the I can't remember the name of it, but basically the one that
Optimus Prime.
Not Optimus Prime. There was one that's gigantic, like bigger than an entire city.
Okay. How about you answer the hypothetical question, Jay?
Okay. Two things. Okay. I'm gonna say the first person. That's not my final answer.
Okay.
The first person, just because I think it would be interesting, but I have a better answer, would be Andy Kaufman.
Absolutely.
I think that would be absolutely fascinating. But I would actually have to say somebody that I could apprentice, Houdini.
That is an interesting answer.
I think that would be amazing. Or, I mean, and I've already given this answer. I mean, Tesla, Tesla's a hero of mine.
I wouldn't call him an artist, though.
Well,
that gets into that whole distinction between artists and scientists, which is a little muddy for me. So,
yeah. Well, because a lot of there are a lot of failures, but a lot of successes, and I kind of think that's part of art.
If it was art, then the failures would be as famous as the success.
Some of them are.
Yeah, that's true. But Houdini would be so interesting because of the way he approached audiences and the way he interacted them and the way he felt he could control them. And, because misdirection is a science and an art all of its own.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be absolutely fascinating.
I have a great respect for Houdini. He really used his abilities to show the audience how their brain works and how it leads to a misunderstanding just based on visual cues.
Right, and how skewed our perception of perception is.
And he actually intended to teach people about ourselves.
Before his unfortunate early demise.
He told people how he did things because he wanted them to learn from it.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know.
Did you see
I gave an amazing answer.
Right. Did you see Adrian Brody's version of him? It's a series. I think it's on Netflix now. It was like a miniseries. I think there's only 6 to 8 episodes, and he plays Houdini. And it starts the story with him very young before he got married, and continues through his death. And it's mostly about how it wasn't about how he did his illusions. It was how he approached them and how he interacted with the audience as part of it. So
Excuse me.
It's really good. Adrian
Cool.
Brody is fantastic in it, and I can't remember what it's called. I think it's actually just called Houdini.
Houdini, I believe so. Yeah, I think
and
it is.
just phenomenal performance and a great story and an aspect of his life that you rarely see.
Now, did he actually die? How I think is that? Did he actually get punched in the?
He did. He
okay,
died.
Yeah.
He died because of internal bleeding.
Because
he was unprepared.
he didn't get the chance to prepare. And then, could you imagine being that guy that killed Houdini?
Right.
It's like, oh, I needed to wait.
Yeah.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah.
Wow.
God, that's
actually,
just ridiculous.
I think, if I remember what they portray in this series, I think it was actually the sepsis that set in after the internal injury that killed him, which was a very common cause of death due to injury at that period of time. So.
Okay. Oh, no, I'd have to say, to answer that question, I definitely go to some of the...
Nobody asked you. It's okay. We can just move on.
So be it.
No, I'm just teasing. Who would you say?
No, I gotta hear who you would say.
Yeah.
I'd say Leonardo.
Yeah, that's a...
I've got to go straight to the inventor. You
Yeah.
know, someone who's not only passionate about arts, but passionate about nature and science.
Yeah.
And again, a
invention.
perfect combination of both.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Someone who did not know how to segregate those fields. And I love that. It's someone who used his knowledge of science and anatomy to be a better artist, and someone who used his knowledge of art
And we've
to
lost
invent.
that. We've lost that so much. There's this huge thing that this idea that scientists and artists are two different things, and they're not.
No.
You know, and we've lost that. And I think in the past couple hundred years, our best artists have been the people who have said, "Fuck that! I'm an artist and a scientist."
One in particular, Richard Feynman,
Absolutely.
who was who took up art on a sabbatical out of a bet. Somebody told him he made a bet that he couldn't learn how to paint and draw, and within a few months he became quite the artist.
Well, and obviously because he was already a great writer.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's to me one of the hardest arts, one of the hardest mediums to excel at is writing on the page, especially nonfiction material, which is what he wrote about it. And he wrote about it so beautifully that even someone like me can understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and that is an art above and beyond, 99% of us.
I think it's about getting out of the mold and learning how to educate yourself. And he talks about as a professor and as a student as well, how he kept jumping into different fields, in this case art, in other cases biology, just on a whim, just to see what it was like. And he surpassed everyone in that field within a very short time because he had the techniques to teach himself. He had the techniques that he devised on his own to just get to the solutions without following the known path.
Right, because he didn't follow what everyone else did. He just followed his intuition.
I wonder if that...
Oh, sounds like me.
How's art going for you, Jay?
Brilliantly. I decorate cakes.
Do you?
Yep. Yeah, and actually, well, Sam is really upset with me because she did it for a long time, and then I did it once, and I was better. And I do that in like everything that we do.
Oh, that kills. That kills
She hates
us.
that.
Yeah.
Do you take requests to make cakes?
Yeah, I can. Oh, let me guess, penis.
Really, Jay? You're gonna go straight to the dick cake?
Well, you already wanted a penis building, so I figured a cake would be
at
the
the
next
opening
thing
of
you
your
could
penis
do.
building. We'll need a penis cake.
Yeah.
Well, the penis building is a little bit cliche. It's been done over and over.
So what would you like?
Some would say that every tall building is a penis cliche. So
Yeah,
you're
true.
right there.
No, we'll talk cakes later.
Okay.
No, I find this very interesting though. Art is always.
And I do
interested me.
woodworking.
You do woodworking?
Yep. Start making. Well, it's not. I've just started. I made that.
Jay,
I
that's
made that.
that's a block of wood with holes cut in it.
Hey, it's a start.
He had to change bits to do that, so don't
I
laugh
did,
at him.
and
And
in
it
fact,
looks like
I used,
he actually used paddle bits on a couple of them.
and
so
I used Dremel to
Yes.
sand a lot of it
Can
down
you
there,
drill
and-
holes on a block of wood?
I do believe so.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Jeffrey.
No, back to the subject of art though. I find the subject to be very
And I do
confusing.
a podcast, which I think is kind of an art thing.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
It
You
is
know,
absolutely. an
there's
art of its
everything-
And a radio show, I do that, and I do stand-up comedy.
It's also an art.
So wait, what was the original question? Do I do arts? How is that going?
You do enough
I
art.
told you, man. I am a Renaissance man. I've been actually thinking about this. So we were talking about Leonardo, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy who came. He's a the original Renaissance man. I'm number 2, you know?
Well, it's very modest of you, I have to say.
Yeah, well, that's me, Mr. Modesty.
Laurie.
Yes.
I do weddings, both photography and I can preside over the wedding.
All right, we get it. You're an artist. I'll give you credit for being a goddamn artist. I'll take it back. No more heckling Jay about being an artist. He's an artist.
Okay, thank you.
All
Well,
right.
you started it. I'm just saying, you know.
Art. I have no definition. Mm-hmm. It's confusing as hell, mesmerizing, beautiful, and I have a very difficult time talking about art. Because
I know you do, because the problem that you have with it is that it's subjective. You've said this to me.
Yes.
Art is subjective. And my response has always been, yes, of course it's subjective. And the reason you don't like that is because you like there to be a right answer. And I think most people who know you would say that. And with art, there is no right answer. That's what makes art art.
Jeffrey doesn't even like having conversations that are subjective.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I'm actually glaring at Jay right now, but he's right. That's
Yeah.
true.
You said it on the podcast.
There's nothing wrong with that. The world needs the people in the world who want to find the right answer.
Monsters.
But equally, we need the people who know that there are no right answers. Yeah. For me, art has always been a way to communicate a part of the human experience to someone else who perhaps has not experienced that aspect of it. And that is why there are so many different mediums in art. We can communicate a very basic human experience through painting, through sculpture, through theater, through dance, through film, through music, through writing. So that's what it is. To me, art is anything that communicates something to you that you yourself have not personally experienced.
And and I think part of it too is sometimes just when it connects with you, even that's what I feel like. And Jeffrey doesn't. He's a book guy, whatever. I watch movies, and that's one. There is a certain type of movie that I will always cry at, and I think that's one reason why I do love movies is because as much as I've talked about how even keeled I am. That is one thing that can really pull emotion out of me. Absolutely.
My daughter and I are both the same way. It takes a great deal to make us cry in our real lives. But in a movie, we will blubber like children.
For me, it's Forrest Gump.
You know, one of the last things we saw together was Inside Out.
Okay, I
the
heard
Pixar
that's
film.
great. I heard that's
and
great.
I'm
sure I will.
Yeah, it's not a children's film under any circumstances. A great film, and it's actually kind of a great way to approach.
But a lot of people are taking their kids.
Right, a lot of people are taking their kids, but it's a great way to approach some of the sadder, more deeper aspects of adult emotions. And she and I were she'd already seen it. This was the first time I had seen it, and she and I were just a mess, you know. And we typically are like that together at movies. So.
The last time I described a film as not a children's film in any circumstance. It was not a Pixar film.
Probably not. So, but it's, you know, it's, and this is a great part of the discussion of what art can do is that if you paid attention to the pop culture and the media around the release of that film, is a lot of people were saying, oh, it's so great because we're talking about mental illness. And that's kind of the point. Yeah. You know, is that it did bring up great things. I thought it actually talked more about, you know, puberty and how children change and what happens to all of us when we start to realize that life isn't this happy-go-lucky, everything's going to be great. You know, there are things that really suck that happen to you when you're 11.
You listen to death metal and hate your father?
No, you lose your hockey game and you move.
Oh, right.
So, and that's, you know, that's kind of the point. I mean, and having spent so much of my young adulthood and my adulthood working in an industry where I don't express my own emotion because it's not appropriate. For me, going to a film is a great cathartic experience.
Absolutely.
You know, to say, yeah, this is great. I'm gonna, and I have no shame about crying in a movie theater. Sometimes I do. Like I was last summer, I was on a first date, and we went to see the Fast and the Furious movie, and at the end, there's this very emotional touching tribute to Paul Walker, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. And then I hear everyone else in the theater sniffling, and I'm like, you guys, shut up. I'm on a date, you know.
And welcome back to the show. So sorry we had a complication with the audio recording. But let's get back to the questions. Jay, just before we lost our recording, you asked an excellent question about something.
Well, how about we get in? No, you were going to ask a question, actually.
I was. I'd like
Why
to get
don't
onto
you
your...
both ask the question, and then I'll decide what to answer.
Yes, see it. So go ahead. Because
even though my
gonna
question is clearly superior, I really want Jay to go first. I feel
you went first last time. Just go ahead, man. You know your question is.
Well, you know she's going to answer your question first.
Yeah, of course, because it's better.
Do
so
I
go
have to
ahead and
separate
ask
you two?
your question. Don't forget, this sound air is on you. You just lost the last 30 minutes of our interview.
30 minutes?
About.
No.
And so you ask the goddamn question, and let's move on with this episode.
I guess what I really wanted to ask, Laurie, is while you're stage managing, do you, especially with the theatrical crowd, it's a very diverse cast, and people who often understand a lot of the more, say, societally aware side of...
Absolutely.
And so do you ever sense a sense of... sexism in your role?
You son of a bitch! You son of a bitch!
You totally stole his question.
Well,
You
no.
absolutely took his question.
I was just waiting. Is he gonna say humor or is he gonna say sexism? Oh, you son of a bitch! You.
Well, are you gonna ask the question now?
Okay. Yes, this is my question, but yeah, it's because the time that I have spent in theater, it does seem like you might have more of a crowd that understands equality, but have you ran into times where you have definitely still had sexism due because being a woman and being a lot of times the manager, the boss, the person that they just need to listen to, have you experienced that sexism?
Absolutely. And
oh, and then what was the other question?
No, I wanted her to answer this question.
We'll answer this question first.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely, I've
of a
experienced
bitch.
it. Absolutely, I've experienced it over my now 33-year career in the arts. I haven't always experienced it. It's not something that is part and parcel of the job. It's actually, it's kind of just part of being a girl and having a vagina.
Yeah.
I'm going to come across it no matter what happens.
Right.
In theater, last year...
I guess that's why I actually thought maybe theater you would experience it a little less is kind of what I
I would say yes. Would say on the whole, yes, that is the answer. But probably not because of what you think. It has, for me, it's not so much about the fact that everyone in the theater is usually working together and there's a real collaborative feeling and you become family and it's very intimate and very intense. It has to do with the age of the men that I work with.
Okay.
In the past few years specifically, the sexism that I have encountered by and large has been with the older generation.
Okay.
People who are my age or
I
older.
was really hoping you weren't going to say the younger generation.
No, the younger men that I work with are usually not a problem.
Okay.
Those that are
Yeah.
a problem that I
It
work
makes
with in
sense.
that generation have specifically been from cultures that are hyper masculine, hyper male dominated.
That really encourages a sort of masculinity mask for young people to wear. Yeah,
Right.
I get
And
that.
I can say the last worst experience I had with sexism was with a local theater company. It was last fall. I was not only a scenic designer, but a scenic artist for them. And there were gentlemen in the show that I worked with who were rude and questioned every decision I made, questioned my design, which had already been approved by the director, which is all the approval I need as a scenic artist and a scenic designer. If the director says it's okay, then it's okay. I'm sorry, if you're an actor and if you have a problem with it, that's not your job.
Right.
I kind of don't put up with that. I like collaboration and I like the idea of working with people, but if the director has approved my work, it's done.
Right.
And if you don't like it, guess what? Sign up next time and you design the show. You spend hours deciding where the tables are going to be. You spend hours doing the lumber math and the calculations and figuring out if you can get this out of your budget, which is abysmally small.
So this guy wasn't such like a star that he could get this all changed?
He thought he was.
From his green room in the
Yeah,
back.
yeah. I mean, he thought he was. And it got to the point where he just almost literally couldn't work with me.
Wow.
You know, and take direction from me. And I came into the theater to find out that he'd actually changed bracing on units that I had built.
Wow.
Because he had felt that they were wrong.
Was this
not even that it wasn't structurally sound, but that it was wrong.
Was this an older fella?
It was an older gentleman.
Yeah, I'm so happy you actually pointed out the generational difference, and I can honestly say I have a great optimism for the generation just coming out of high school right now. They're far more tolerant, far more aware of privilege, far more just accepting of different people's lifestyles and makeup.
Now, again, it's not across the board that I have that issue. I work with several production companies in town, one of whom is owned by a young man who I believe in his late 20s. And when I work for him on a gig, he relies on me and will often say, okay, guys, Laurie's in charge.
Makes people feel vulnerable in any way. And that's, Jay, going to be really hard for some people. How do you keep it clean, Jay?
When? Where?
At work.
It's easy. I'm at work. I don't know. It's
a switch.
Easy.
It really is a switch in your head.
Yeah, like especially after grad school, where I had to play a role of a student and a teacher's aide, and sometimes a teacher, and you know, like to switch between those. Yeah, you just change.
Okay.
It becomes second nature. You know, there's humor that I can use here that I would never use with a cast.
It's like when on the radio show, our first radio show, you said something about things I was coming up, and I didn't say boners because I was on the radio.
Right.
You know, it's just it gets filtered out. So
speaking of which,
boners.
Darn it, you got there before I did. Sorry.
You're not going to get to boners before I do.
I was kind of hoping to bring up our radio show again.
Yes.
Just another reminder, but Jay and I have the opportunity of having a show on local radio, Radio Free Fargo, 95.9 in Fargo. You can also find us on the web.
RadioFreeFargo.org, and you can stream the show.
Yep, and we can stream the show. We're on live every Thursday evening from
Central Standard Time
from 6 to 7 p.m. And we do take live call-ins, so feel free if you'd like to talk to us or if you'd like to suggest a gripe.
No toll-free number yet, I don't think.
No toll-free number. But the number is on the website, so go ahead and check it out.
If you have a cell phone, you can call us toll-free, probably.
No, I think
I don't think the number is on the website, so go ahead and listen at that time for the number.
So bringing it full circle, though, the way humor comes across, what we can do on this podcast is not what we can do on the radio,
right?
Obviously. Thank you, FCC.
But that's kind of the joy of being in a different medium. You know, there's so much humor that is specific to a medium. There's things that you can get away with on South Park.
Yeah.
That you couldn't get away with portraying on what's a good sitcom right now.
Well, and just to bring, I'm not even sure if this part got cut out, but I said my thesis was about terrorism movies before and after 9/11.
Love those kind of movies, yeah.
The first movie, the two movies that I looked at afterwards, of course, were in pre-production before 9/11.
Correct.
The first movie to come out after 9/11 was Team America. That was truly in production after 9/11 about terrorism was Team America World Police.
Right.
And of course, like that's exactly what you're talking about. And of course, we had a little discussion about South Park that I think got, but they did that perfectly because by using marionettes, you diffuse a lot of the issues that could come about of doing a terrorism movie 4 years after 9/11.
But you intentionally dehumanize
Wait, 4 years?
You intentionally dehumanize it because you're allowed to talk about the topic, which goes way back to the creation of science fiction.
Yeah.
Science fiction
Yes.
writing started as a way to
talk
criticize bad
current
governments
issues.
without getting arrested.
Right, or cultural taboos.
Exactly. Well, and the biggest one is some people say that there's a discussion about whether the first science fiction novel was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or if it was Zamyatin's We. And We is this very dystopian, very sad, very dark consideration of a dystopian society. He was Russian, and he wrote it as a way to criticize his government.
Yeah.
And the way he did it was so that he wouldn't get executed.
Right.
Well,
And that is what I think humor, especially of all of the types of theater or film, that especially has a great way to do that. There are a lot of things that you can talk about with humor that you couldn't talk about any other way. I'd previously brought up Family Guy. I had heard an interview about, there's an episode where Brian and somebody go back in time to stop 9/11, but it turns out that was the bad choice. So they go back and let 9/11 happen, and I think Stewie high-fives somebody and says, "Yay, we got 9/11 done." Apparently, of course, there was this huge reaction to it. And Seth MacFarlane said, but that was taken out of context.
Right.
And if you saw the entire episode, it made sense, which I agree with. That there's the humor is part of the context and has to be in the space. One of the reasons I actually never watched Family Guy, besides just not getting into the whole animation thing, is that talking babies creep me out. Talking.
You're not a fan of Look Who's Talking?
Oddly enough, as much as I love Seth MacFarlane, talking babies and talking teddy bears creep me out.
I don't know Ted either.
I liked Ted. I thought it was great.
Oh, really?
I'll see the second one when I have a chance. But so that was why I didn't see it. But there is so much humor in that little baby.
Yeah.
Well,
and when you
again,
get over
a
the
perfect
fact,
outlet, yeah.
right, and he can say things that no one else can say.
And actually he really advanced as a character into being more of that voice as opposed to a world domination.
Right, trying to kill his mom, and which to me was hysterical. I thought that was great.
I think we need to keep supporting the adult focused cartoons. We need to keep supporting this type of comedy in general, because comedy has a license.
Buy them, don't download them, people.
Yes.
I mean, if
Buy
you're unemployed, go ahead and download them, I suppose.
If you're a fan and you don't have money, or you have money but you don't really want to spend it.
Let's not even open the whole can of worms about buying versus stealing art.
If you
Otherwise, we will never leave here.
If you want to convince yourself that you're going to pay later in life, that's cool. No, but just an amateur follower of comedy. Jay is a lot more immersed in it than I. But comedy has a license to tackle issues which no other commentary can. Right. And I think it has a license to push the limit.
And I think they should be allowed to push the limit. And, one of you guys asked me what some of my gripes were. One that I just thought of is I have a huge problem with, I believe it's called the Motion Picture Association of America. This is the
MPAA.
MPAA. Yeah. This is the
ratings, right?
This is the ratings board. And there was a great documentary about this a few years ago. I can't remember what it's called. Do you remember what it was about? It was about this guy who was trying to figure out who sits on the board because they're not a transparent organization. Right. And he found the board says that they are the parents of young children. All of them are parents of young children. And that's how they make their decision about ratings. It turns out one of the guys was a priest.
Yeah, no.
And that I have a huge problem with.
Yeah.
I have a huge problem with religion commenting on art. Yeah. Religion has no place.
MPAA is very similar to the Family Research Council and so many other organizations that deem it necessary to censor society in order to protect the family, quote unquote.
Right.
But the issue here is they're actually just oppressing people with their personal beliefs.
Right.
Because you can't, I want to get into this after we talk a little bit about comedy and such, but censorship is so biased and based on everyone's individual perspective.
Yeah, just like how I say you shouldn't legislate taste, you also shouldn't ban it.
Exactly.
I mean, from
arts. There was actually an episode of the 70s show that there was a congressional hearing about or something like that.
Okay.
Because there was a masturbation joke. So for me, not only should religion be nowhere near art, neither should the government. Now, I am, however, a supporter of the National Endowment of the Arts.
Right.
I think one of the reasons that I've been a starving artist for most of my adult life is that because arts are not properly supported. That's an entirely different argument. But while a government should assure that there is, or help assure that there's a society that will support artists, in no way should any government entity decide what is art, what is valuable art,
but
that kind of thing.
I don't think a government should decide what is valuable or what is important, but okay, only recently in my life have I really come to understand and appreciate the importance of art, at least a little bit anyway, on society, and certainly more importantly on science. And we had talked about this in a previous time. Neil deGrasse Tyson gives a wonderful pitch about how art influenced science and the discovery of astronomy, etc., etc. Beautiful. Go check it out. The storytelling of science. It's a great video on YouTube.
He also has a great video about how, I believe he has a great video about how Van Gogh knew what the stars looked like.
Yep, that's the storytelling of science video.
Yeah.
And so going into this, Netherlands has always had a long history of supporting artists and writers, and so many other forms of art.
And some of the most beautiful museums on the planet. Yeah.
And they were the first country, as far as I'm aware, I may be wrong about this, that knew the importance of financially supporting artists. And how now so many countries in Europe spend a huge portion of their GDP supporting and financially sustaining artists so that they are able to contribute to the culture that they live in, and so that they can later it becomes an investment into the country.
Absolutely.
And so
hippies.
Well, so I guess at some point governments need to decide how they're going to spend that money, who gets those grants.
Right.
And so how do you relate that to what you were saying? How governments decide?
That's really the trick. I mean, because the National Endowment for the Arts took a real hit because of Robert Mapplethorpe. So for me, that ties into the idea that religion should influence our decisions about art. I think shouldn't, right? Because I think if the government is going to support arts, it should take out the religion. But I mean, all of us in this room know that religion and the government is a huge issue in this country, and is perhaps our biggest problem in becoming a better country. Is there's too much religion in our country. Everyone harps about the separation of church and state.
In every country,
there's just not enough of it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But that's me, and that's what I think. So I think with the government choosing what art is important, it becomes less of an issue when the government has more money to give than what they give now.
Okay.
Everyone harps about NASA and what their budget is. And again, Dr. Tyson has an amazing video about what that actually is. That's actually bigger than our national arts budget. So, I'm one of those people who believes that our country is not going to move forward until we address how we treat science and how we treat art and how we fund them and the importance that we give them in our culture.
It's about reallocating the funds and making sure that we get more than half a penny on the dollar for NASA and more
than an eighth of a penny for the arts.
Right.
So
well, listen, why should I give my money for a bunch of people like jump around in different outfits and pretend to be other people? Why don't you just go to therapy like a regular adult?
My answer to that would be, and this is another thing I hear all the time. I hear people who I would call civilians who are not in the arts
Normies.
The way that I am.
She's pointing at me, by the way.
I hear them say, "Yeah, but art's so I don't actually consume any art." Every single one of us benefits from the arts every single day.
Yeah.
The movies that you like, the music that you like, the novels that we read, the graphic imagery that we see, that we buy into.
Your favorite teacher who inspired you as a kid who loved the arts.
Exactly.
And because of that,
exactly. The books that we read as adults every couple of years.
The TV. I mean, we're in a TV golden age right now.
Even the most crude, uneducated American watches TV.
Yeah.
And they benefit.
Well, unless you're watching Duck Dynasty.
Right. But even then, I would have to admit that there's an artistic effort by the production staff.
Yeah, not to mention the acting that goes into it.
Well,
yes,
they
that's
made
true.
him. I mean, they made a choice. They made him grow those beards.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that was a smart decision.
yeah.
They didn't make him be bigoted.
Right.
No, just made him
No,
grow
but
beards.
but they made the choice to give them their voice. So
Yeah.
So that's my response.
Well,
is there's more art than we know, and let's just support it. Let's first of all let's give the artists the freedom to say what they want to say. You know, if I don't want my 5-year-old to hear a discussion about a penis implant going wrong during a first date, I will make that decision.
right.
If I don't want my 14-year-old daughter to be introduced to the idea that Ellen DeGeneres is a homosexual, I will make that decision.
Not to mention you have to value how much violence and or sexual content you want in your child's life.
Right.
And I think that's something that just is clearly overlooked by any rating.
Absolutely, and because it's also different for each child.
Right. Right.
It's different for each child. I reared Taryn on a steady stream of films. And one of the things that other adults in my life criticized me for was that they couldn't understand how I had a problem with Barney and I had a problem with the Power Rangers. But I let her see the Lord of the Rings movies in the theater.
Right.
Okay.
And my argument was, well, first of all, Barney's an idiot.
Yeah.
He treats my child like she's an idiot. The Power Rangers, the issue that I had with them, violence-wise, was that it dehumanized the violence and made it seem fantastical and not real because they didn't look like people. That
And they're
bothered
giant
me.
robots.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't want her to have the disconnect with violence. I wanted her to understand that violence was real.
Right.
It wasn't something you play with. It's not something that you attempt on a whim. However, the first time we saw the very first Lord of the Rings in the theater, covered her eyes when Boromir died, because that was a very intimate, very forceful death. The close-ups on his body, the arrows hitting him, that's what I covered her eyes. I wanted her to see the big battle scenes because I wanted her to understand that sometimes you have to decide. You have to decide to take a stand. And the way that I reared her is that art was often the way that I communicated my standards to her. I didn't sit her down and say, okay, Taryn, this is right and this is wrong. Taryn, this is a great film. Let's go see this. Let's talk about this. Boromir sacrificed his life. You know, we took her to see the Magic of Myth exhibit, which was about Star Wars.
Yeah.
And one of my proudest moments was this little 10-year-old figuring out that the little tiny Anakin Skywalker was right in front of Darth Vader. And she said, look, that's who he becomes. So at that very young age, we started talking about Star Wars and the myth and the hero's journey and the monomyth and that type of thing. So that's how we approached right or wrong with her.
Wow.
I often say that I'm not a Trekkie, but I'm a Trekkie by default because I married one and I gave birth to one. You know, so life lessons came from Star Trek.
Well, and that's I think a lot about that because there's definitely a collection of series that I'm gonna want my child to see that I'm like, these are what I see as influential and actually have a good life lesson in them. And they're fun as hell because they're sci-fi.
Right, exactly.
A lot of them, you know.
Exactly.
I think, yeah, no, absolutely.
Exactly.
If I can pull back just a second to some of the censorship that you were talking about and how the MPAA and many other organizations are really basing censorship on cultural or religious ideals.
Absolutely.
And if I could gripe, I want to, since Jay and I just started a radio show, we're coming head first into the FCC. And one of the big things about the FCC is, of course, they don't like profanity.
The 7 words, yeah?
Well, George Carlin touched on this, of course, and it goes a lot deeper. Why?
And those
words?
are definitely outdated too.
Oh, yeah. But it goes into the history of the English language and, of course, the bias against the Germanic tongue and among many other things. But just to read directly from the FCC website, it says, the FCC defines profanity as including language so grossly offensive to members of the public who actually hear it as to amount to a nuisance. There are more subjective words in that sentence.
How do you decide? You're right. How do you decide that?
The FCC decides.
You know, how do you decide what's offensive for someone else?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's after 10
Well,
p.m.
it's
Of
like-
course, you can
Right,
play whatever you want.
And
but-
the really silly thing about it is that in this day and age, the way that we consume public media, the way we consume film and talk shows and podcasts and movies and music, it's now a personal thing. We can get it on our phones. We don't have to be in public with other people to do this.
Well,
if something offends me, I can shut it the fuck off.
Between YouTube, movies, anything on the internet, there is no more censorship, and you can't protect people from hearing specific words.
And you shouldn't. I mean, and you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to shield. You talk about what's right or wrong with what's going on.
Well, one of the things that I've always found very interesting in my travels is that people define profanity not by a specific word choice, but more based on the language that their mother would have slapped their hand from. You know, you can find Swedish people who will curse like sailors in English, but the moment they switch over to Swedish, they'll whisper in hushed tones in their own language.
They're profane words.
Right, they're profane words. And that is extremely interesting to think about. Going straight through Wikipedia, if I wanted to look up the history of the word profane, or at least what is profanity, it has so much religious origin.
Oh, really?
It's frustrating. The term profane.
Well, you just told me profane.
Yeah,
was
yeah.
religious.
I always knew that profanity was religious in origin. But the term profane originates from the classical Latin profanus, meaning before the temple or outside the temple. And this is
speech outside of sacred speech.
Right. It carried the meaning of either desecrating what is holy or with a secular purpose. So the very notion that we're censoring profanity is an affront to secularism as we know it.
The very notion that we're atheists on the radio, we are profane.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that is exactly right.
Because we're speaking
So
out
since
loud.
everything we're saying is profane,
Absolutely.
I think we should lead a campaign to censor atheists from the radio just to show how crazy this is.
no, I think we should just use this to justify saying anything because everything we're saying is profane.
Well, I think we should make
But you're right. Actually,
I think we should make this a public campaign. Let's take this to the web.
How can we go on the radio if we're
The
advocating
best that you
to
can
take
hope for is
ourselves?
someone's going to protest.
Well,
you want to protest.
But that's the thing.
That's
Let's
Why
go.
would they protest?
free
They want
information.
us off the air.
Let's go
Because
straight
people
to the
don't know any
FCC.
better.
Let's go straight to the FCC and let's say we need to make sure that
Do you know
you're
how many
banning
movies
all
I've
atheists.
watched because people have protested it?
Yeah.
Movies I would never consider seeing. Banned books I would never consider reading.
Even now,
because someone has said you shouldn't do it.
Right. Even now in India and so many other countries, books are being banned. Even though India is considered a secular country, books are being banned if they're offensive to any religious sensibilities.
Right.
It is still against the law to offend people. So we see where we're going with this. If you have censorship of any kind relating to profane or what is indecent, what you're doing is simply removing the very nature of secularism that we've all depended or based our freedom on.
Well, beyond that, you're just removing personal expression.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In every way.
You know, I mean, and all great artists throughout history have dealt with that. Someone has said, you shouldn't do that because it will offend someone. Who cares?
I get that all the time.
Who cares?
This part is very interesting to me. It's talking about the relationship between the Germanic and the Latin origins of English language, and it says the swear words and curse words that are considered profane tend to be Germanic, such as shit and fuck. The more technical alternatives are Latin, such as defecate, excrete, fornicate, and so on. And those are not considered profane, which is ridiculous. I mean, if you're going to go with a specific word, you might as well go with every alternative word that means the same thing. I'm just saying.
Fuck just sounds better.
It does.
I mean, let's
It's
admit
so I mean, there's a whole thing about how versatile it is.
Oh, yeah.
it is. It is. I
One of
think
the
Matt
most
Damon had a
versatile.
great thing about it in his actor studio episode.
Yeah.
One of the questions that every actor gets asked is, what's your favorite word? And he says, fuck. And he says it can be used as a contraction. It's
Yeah.
used as a declaration. It's used as an exclamation, a conjunction. And I think it's agreeing.
Noun.
Yeah. I mean, and
Comma.
the thing that I have
Palindrome.
always kind of sworn a lot, and for many years my daughter was uncomfortable with, "Mommy, don't swear." And the first time she swore, I was like, "Oh my goodness, what did you just say?" And she said, "Well, you're right. Sometimes that's the only word that works, because my point was never, say what you mean and use the words that you mean. And there's so many words you can use. Don't limit yourself. Find the right definition, find the word that you want. And sometimes fuck is the word that you want."
And that actually is, that just kind of goes back to when we were talking about religion earlier, is that I don't care what you are. I hate when people mislabel themselves and they're just like, "Oh, I'm Catholic because that's a safe option," but they don't believe in anything that Catholicism teaches. That always bothers me. It's just if you believe this and that, there's somewhere out there's somebody that believes everything that you believe. Yeah. And just be like, "Oh, I'm a this."
It's the same thing, like I always say with sex. I hate labels that have to do with a person's sexuality. I hate the word kink, and I hate it when people say, "Oh, no one likes me," and I'm like, you know what? For sure, one thing that I know for sure, whatever you're into,
somebody else is into it.
If it's olive oil on bubble wrap, if it's balloons, if it's clowns, whatever. If it's teddy bears, if it's dressing up as a raccoon, all of these things, someone else out there is into it, and that's one of the great things that our internet has done for us, is to connect us.
It makes everything universal, and the correct term of the correct usage of the term to democratize it implies to bring to the people, to make equal, and the internet has democratized every single concept in such a way that the entire population of this planet can digest it, consume it, and share it.
Right.
And wow.
Well, except for North Korea.
Right. One of the
Yeah.
One of the little artistic projects I'm working on right now for a friend is she's dressing up as Penny from Inspector Gadget for Halloween, and I'm making the book. Gadget. So I'm on the internet looking at pictures, and there are discussion groups about Inspector Gadget. Oh, yeah. I mean, if that doesn't prove that the internet can bring you anything, I don't know what can. You can discuss anything.
I mean, even the fact that I think we're looking for a niche. I mean, of people that want to hear and talk about gripes. Yeah. I mean,
I think one of the great advantages of having a show about gripes is that everyone has them.
Yes, that was a big thing behind deciding why we did this, is because I'm like, everybody has something that they would like to get off their chest. Yeah. It's hard to get some people to do that, but everybody has them.
But now, how do we bring our message on the radio in such a way that doesn't limit us on how we want to describe things, but at the same time, because I don't swear a lot. I swear when I feel that it's. Yeah, I swear when I feel that it's good for the message. I grew up when I was a kid. I loved movies about court and law.
That explains so much.
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't it?
So there was a great movie called From the Hip. Right. It was like early 90s, late 80s. And in that movie, the lawyer calls the person on the stand, calls him an asshole. And the judge says, "Excuse me, there will not be profanity in my court." He said, "But he is an asshole, and there's no better word to describe him."
Robert Downey Jr., I think, right?
Was it?
Yeah. I think maybe.
I'm sure I've seen this.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And I love this idea that they spend weeks in court
arguing if asshole is admissible. Yes. Yeah.
And whether or not there is an alternative word that means the same thing.
Right. It's kind of like our discussion about moist.
Yeah, I think because I think in the movie wasn't his client specifically trying to waste the money of the other person.
Was trying to waste time so that they could dismiss.
Right. He wanted to elongate the process. Yep. And this was the thing this lawyer came up with.
Judd Nelson, by the way.
Judd Nelson, that's who it was. I knew it was one of those guys. So, but yeah, that's what he did.
One of those people.
And by what I mean is one of the Brat Packs.
Yeah.
That era of actors. But yeah, so he had stacks of books on the table, and he would like look things up and then throw them to be really dramatic. But yeah, he was trying to waste time and money.
I think I'm not going to be a rebel rouser here, and I don't think we're trying to set the world on fire, but I am willing to butt heads with the FCC about this. This is an outdated culture. It's a system of control, and it needs to end.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much. Listen, I was listening to the radio, and the N word came on, and it was like 6:00, and I was just like, "Oh, that's interesting." I didn't realize that would be.
Was it in reference to a controversy, or
it was in a song? It was in a song.
Oh,
that
okay.
was, and I was just like, "Oh, interesting." I'm like, see, again, that's something that I don't necessarily. We've talked too about when you make something so bad that you shouldn't do it, then people want to do it.
Right.
It's just like when I'm around kids and I accidentally do say a swear word, I don't draw attention to it by going, oh, oh. If you keep going, a lot of times
They'll pass over it.
Yes,
but if you respond to it, and that's the thing about kids, if you laugh, they will do it again and again and
now
again.
they're saying, oh, you... Mom.
Yeah, and that's
Daddy's
the problem I have.
Daddy's a shit.
Because I think little kids swearing is hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
And my little 5-year-old and 3-year-old niece do it sometimes, and I am the worst aunt because I laugh hysterically.
Right. But like with that song that was on, obviously, like that's a good. I always think of things in teaching moments. Like if that came on and they would happen to repeat it, that's a teaching moment to explain why this is not okay. Yes, we're hearing it, and even at that age, even talking about freedom and whatnot, but then just saying, but this is not okay because of this.
Right.
And
I had long conversations about that word with my child and the Girl Scouts that I was involved in about the word slut. And that was the word that I wanted stricken from her vocabulary, and a word that I refuse to use myself.
Except on podcasts, apparently.
Well, right.
I know.
But
in reference
to someone, I would never use that as a judgment of someone. And I think, again, giving people the freedom to use it is fine. I personally didn't want to rear a child with that standard in mind, specifically because she was a girl and it was going to be used against her at some point.
Right. Well, Doug Stanhope has a great bit of talking about how we are breeding weakness into people. We're teaching them weakness because he said you could do this about anything. If you grew up and your parents told you that "mama" is the worst thing you could ever be called, then somebody's gonna say "la," and you're gonna go cry and eat ice cream.
Oh yeah.
But he goes, if parents didn't teach that, he goes, then I could go up and be like, "Hey, you cunt," and she'd be like, "Oh no, my name's Rebecca," and you wouldn't have that.
Or better yet, the reaction I have is if someone uses a word that I don't appreciate, I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah.
That is your opinion.
Yeah.
Go ahead. A great term that has been applied to me, actually to my face, by extended family members is godless whore. And for a long time that bothered me.
Awesome.
Now I embrace it. And now I actually list it as my political affiliation on Facebook as godless whore.
Disempower it.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah. And it's I enjoy the term godless. Never taken money for sex, so whore is not appropriate for me. But I just, and it's, that's a great way to view parenting. The thing that I literally just read this a couple days ago. It was a conversation that I'd started on Facebook. My 3-year-old niece had come to me and said, I need help in the bathroom. And I said, honey, you can do it yourself. And she stood in front of me and said, but auntie, I'm just a little girl. And I said,
no,
did you just say you can't do something because you're just a girl? Yes. I said, no, that is not going to fly in this house. So I marched her into the bathroom, helped her move her little stool, and talked her through turning on the water. These are all things that she does. She knows how to do. She basically just wanted my attention, which is fine. But
that's a way to do it.
The idea of her saying, I'm just a little girl,
it's
kind of inflamed me. I had said,
next time I want Laurie's attention, I'll just use casual sexism.
You can't. That's a great way to start. You can't. Don't ever think of yourself as just a girl.
Yeah.
And I kind of said this on Facebook, and a couple people have said, "Well, she was just asking for attention." I'm like, fine, but we're not starting this habit in this house.
Yeah. It's almost like why
she's not going to be just a girl. And someone else posted a article about how professional women are talking about how they don't want to use the word just anymore. Because women start conversations with the superiors. Do you have just a minute? I just have a question. I'm just checking. And it is a way of transferring authority. It's a way of
I noticed
being
that,
submissive.
That's why
And so I've tried to really pay attention to that and not say, even tonight, I've tried to not say, this is just how I feel. Too bad. It's how I feel.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot to be said for how the words we choose communicate more than we sometimes understand.
On that note as well, if you
Two
have
other
any...
great voices, by the way. Two male aphrodisiac
aphrodisiac
I
voices.
could listen to either of them talk all day.
Oh, yeah. NGT in my ear.
Yeah,
rocket.
absolutely.
If you would like to contribute by asking a question or leaving a comment for Laurie as well, please email us anytime at openmicgripe at gmail.com or tweet to us at openmicgripe. And we would love to add your voice to the mix. We'd love to have her answer any questions about art that clearly Jay and I are unable to answer.
Hey, wait, are you calling me not an artist again?
Oh, God.
I'm
Here we
calling you a
go.
moron.
Here we go. Here we go.
Okay. So, Jay and I would like to thank you for joining us and listening to Open Mic Gripe, the place where serious and silly complaints come to chat.
We will be bringing you new episodes every week. Now, again, let me point out that we are also live on the radio, 95.5 or...
95.9.
Sorry, that's my mistake. 95.9 KRFF, Radio Free Fargo. Make sure to, you can stream us at radiofreefargo.org, and that is 6 to 7 Central Time.
6 to 7 p.m.
PM Central Time. Yeah, check that out.
On Thursday evenings.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What time is it again?
6 to 7 Central
Thursday
Standard Time,
evenings.
Thursday.
Oh my God.
We'll do. We'll fix this in post. But of course, then we encourage you to participate by sending your gripes, grievances, and opinions to openmicgripe@gmail.com. Or if you're going to get in contact with us during the show, go ahead and message us from our Facebook page at Open Mic Gripe.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. I absolutely did. And if you didn't, check us out next week when we will be discussing your gripes.